Should the Chicago Bulls swing big this offseason and go after a star player like Zion Williamson or Domantas Sabonis? All right, go. The Bulls season concludes with their loss to the Heat in the play-in tournament, and there's a lot of talk about what might happen. A lot of them are thinking, hey, patience. We got a good young core here. Kobe and Josh finishing strong. Modest, a really strong second half of his rookie year. But they're still at least a real piece away. Do they wait? And as AK mentioned in his season-ending press conference, look ahead to that financial flexibility in the summer of 2026. Or if some teams out there are looking to move their star player or one of their star players, do they maybe jump the gun? We've heard a lot about the Pelicans looking to move Zion this offseason. There's also talk about Domas after that disappointing end to their season and maybe shaking things up. Let's start with Zion. Do you think it makes sense from the Pelicans' perspective that they, at this point, just need to move this guy?
Well, it's interesting because obviously they made a change in their front office, as did the Kings, with Joe Dumars coming in. And one of the rumors was that he was going to be under pressure by the ownership group to move Zion Williamson. Zion, obviously an incredible talent, but has really struggled to stay healthy. And it's been hard to bank on him as being the franchise player. And so they are, the Pelicans, in a great position to maybe get another franchise caliber player in the draft. And if they do that, maybe it makes sense for them to move on from Zion, who's actually on a pretty favorable contract here. 5 years, $197 million. He just finished the second year of that. And there are some interesting non-guarantees in his contract through each of the next 3 years. So they could get off of it scot-free if they wanted to. I think he's too good and too talented to just waive and not worry about it. So I think they'll try to get something back for him if they tried to move him. And it's just a matter of how much would you give up. So for me, Zion is probably the one guy that I would feel comfortable with the Bulls putting a package together to go out and get. He's young. Obviously, there's a risk with it in terms of the injury, but he plays with pace. He's obviously got a good relationship with Lonzo from their days together in New Orleans. And he puts a lot of pressure on the rim. He's a dynamic scorer. And those are the things the Bulls need. So from a fit perspective, I think he actually makes a lot of sense sliding in next to Domantas Sabonis in between Josh Giddey and Kobe White. I think it's a matter of the cost and what the Pelicans would be really looking for in that kind of a deal.
Right. That's the thing. You assume there's draft capital involved. That was one of the other things AK mentioned in his season-ending press conference. Hey, we wanted to reclaim control of our 2025 first-round pick and therefore entire control of our future draft picks moving forward. They did that with the Levine trade to Sacramento. Pelicans are going to want some combination of draft capital in a Zion Williamson trade, which maybe the Bulls are okay with doing. I don't know. I think, AK has some maybe sour memories of forfeiting 2 first-rounders for Vooch because we saw the ceiling of how that worked out for the Bulls. When it comes to, you just mentioned how he might fit with some of these other young pieces. If you're the Bulls, are any of those names non-negotiable, will not trade? If you're the Pelicans, is there one, is Modest the one that you would go after if you're talking about not picks, but players that the Bulls might be putting in a trade offer?
I think they'd certainly be asking for Modest, but that's probably where I would draw the line and say it's just not worth it at that point. Not to say that Modest is a better player than Zion, but just with the risk that you incur when you trade for a guy like Zion, you can't also be giving up multiple draft picks and your premium young players. So I think it would really be a question of like, how cheaply can you get him? I imagine there would be other teams involved in this. And so the price wouldn't be so low that it's like, just for free. And so that's part of the challenge too, is putting together a deal, but maybe you're able to get off of Patrick Williams' contract as part of this and then also attach expiring salary as sweetener plus some draft picks. That's the kind of deal I could see the Bulls maybe wanting to do, where it frees up some space longer term and allows the Pelicans to get off of some space after next season. But I would not be really excited to give up Modest at this point because he's obviously on a rookie scale contract. He showed a ton of promise, and it's just not, I think Zion is probably not the player where you do that. There's got to be, I think, a tier above where it's like, okay, if you're trading for Giannis or Luka, sure, maybe Modest gets thrown in there. But for Zion, I think with the risk, you're hoping to buy a little bit lower on him.
Yeah, so, Zach Lowe was talking about this on his new Ringer pod with Michael Pina the other day. It's just the most recent example of national NBA media and national NBA talking heads talking about Zion, the situation the Pelicans are in, and teams around the league who might be interested in such a trade, and the Bulls being named. it happened with a different national NBA reporter earlier this season when Zion trade talk was going around. The Bulls came up again. So it's not like fabricated out of thin air that there could hypothetically be mutual interest. I think just as a Bulls fan, depending on what that package is, if it's a couple of firsts, if you can protect Modest in that deal, I would be open to it. It's obviously just all risk reward when it comes to Zion. When he is out there playing, he has proven to be an all NBA caliber player, not just like a borderline star, an all NBA talent. It's just a matter of the confidence the Bulls would have in building around a player like that, because we all know they are at least one star caliber player away from actually contending right now. They have promising young pieces. Promising young pieces don't contend in this league. It's just a matter of the risk attached to that current star caliber player.
And I think the other piece is just the contract. I mean, some of these guys, just off the top of my head, like Damian Lillard in the next couple of years is going to be making close to $60 million. Zion is making a lot of money, but it's still only around 25% of the salary cap moving forward. $36.7 million this year. Next year, it'll be 39.5, 42, and 44.9. So that's not a lot of money for, like you're saying, an all-star, all-NBA caliber player. Obviously, the risk in there is baked in, right? Because it's not this giant amount of money, and there are these outs in the deal where if he doesn't play enough games, you could waive the contract and not even have it on your books. Domantas Sabonis, on the other hand, from the Kings, that's another one that has come up in just the space of Bulls and Kings trades. They've had multiple now.
Believe it or not, he's making more money than Zion.
Exactly where I was heading. $40 million this year, 43, 46.7, and then 49.9. So that's a heftier contract, and frankly, not a player I'd be as excited about, especially when you would probably have to give up a similar caliber of package to bring him in as kind of the center of the future for the Bulls. Does not make as much sense to me.
I mean, if you're the Kings, you got to complete that and demand Vooch in the trade, right? Like,
and probably Lonzo.
And probably Lonzo. You got to reunite the 21-22 Chicago Bulls. Even though they've changed front offices, maybe the new people in charge will decide they need to do that. From the Bulls' perspective, there are obviously some ties there. You know, like Arturas played professionally over in Europe with the legend Arvydas Sabonis, Domas's father, and
both Lithuanian.
And I think, you know, in certain ways, Domas can provide some of the, again, big umbrella. I'm not like making direct comparisons with these players, but like the Joker, Vooch, Domas style of big man in the NBA who, you know, obviously do work on the boards, but then facilitate in addition to, you know, providing the scoring punch that they do. Domas, led the NBA in rebounding, I believe, this season. We've also seen him, you know, shine as a facilitator, not really a floor spacer by any stretch of the imagination. The Domas and Giddey pairing specifically to me is really curious, because then you're talking about like, okay, well, we saw Giddey and Kobe play well off of each other. Throwing Sabonis into that, it's like it's one too many weird NBA offense cooks in the kitchen, if that makes sense.
I think it really does. And you mentioned Vooch and Jokic. It's like Sabonis has a similar skill set as a dribble handoff guy, operating as, you know, a post facilitator, dribble handoffs. He's not the floor spacer. And I think that's a really underrated element of what the Bulls got out of Vooch this year. Obviously, 40% on threes, much better than the 29% from the year before. The 3-point stuff, I think, with Vooch is pretty hard to predict, just in terms of how hot and cold he has gotten.
Up and down since his arrival.
But Sabonis is just not a shooter. And like, the Bulls want to play fast. They want to get the ball up the court. They want to get behind the defense and have a trailing big to come in and step into easy threes. Sabonis is not going to do that. So I don't think the fit is that good in general, just with the way that the Bulls want to play. And that's kind of how I'm looking at the draft too, of people want, you know, a rim rolling, rim protecting big like Kamen Malawach. He doesn't really fit the style I think that the Bulls want to play. So I'm just keeping that in mind. The Bulls did this whole thing about streamlining the process, right? And skipping the rebuild and, you know, spend 3 years tanking and getting top draft picks because they wanted to build around this young core that they have that has experience. And so if they're going to do that, they have to cater to their skill sets. And Sabonis, I think he could help as a pick and roll partner for Giddey and for Kobe, but he doesn't add that floor spacing element that I think the Bulls really are going to need from the center spot. Because when you think about driving lanes, the ability for Giddey to put pressure on the rim, the Bulls big needs to pull the opposing big away from the basket in order to make that happen. And Sabonis is just not going to do that.
We will soon enough find out as the Bulls move into the offseason phase of their calendar year if AK and his crew continue to not only practice, not only preach patience, but practice it and wait until that big free agency bonanza of 2026 with a lot of names coming onto the open market and maybe an additional year this upcoming season of development from some of their young players to entice a star player to come play with them that way, as opposed to swinging big and paying big for a name like Zion or Domas this summer. That's it for this mini pod. Make sure you subscribe to that CHGO Sports YouTube channel. Check out our 5 CHGO Bulls episodes every week throughout the offseason too. That's right.